They said she was nothing more than a decoration, a silent, plain wife hanging on the arm of the city's most arrogant billionaire, Dominic Mercer. For 3 years, Dominic treated Fiona like she was invisible, leaving her in the shadows while he chased fame, fortune, and other women. He thought she was weak. He thought she was trapped. But tonight, at the most exclusive gala of the century, Dominic is about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. He didn't realize that the person everyone came to see was the wife he just insulted. This is the story of how the invisible wife became the queen of the night. The silence in the penthouse was suffocating. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of a held breath, the kind that precedes a shattering. Fiona stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master suite, her fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted the strap of her navy blue gown. It was a modest dress, elegant but understated, exactly the kind Dominic insisted she wear. "Don't draw attention," he had told her over breakfast, his eyes glued to his tablet. "You're there to support me, Fiona, not to make a spectacle." Support him. That was the word he used to mask the reality, disappear behind him. The door to the suite swung open, and Dominic Mercer walked in. He was undeniable in his presence, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a custom tuxedo cut by the finest tailors in London. He checked his reflection in the mirror, adjusting his cufflinks without sparing a glance at his wife. "The car is downstairs," Dominic said, his voice clipped. "We're already 10 minutes behind schedule. Winston is going to be there, and I need to corner him before the auction starts." Fiona turned, hoping for a sliver of validation. "How do I look, Dominic?" Dominic paused, finally looking at her. His gaze was critical, scanning her like a balance sheet that wasn't quite adding up. He didn't smile. He didn't soften. He just nodded, a quick, dismissive gesture. "Fine," he said. "Appropriate. Just remember the rules, Fiona. Smile, nod, and don't try to talk business. These people are sharks. They'll eat someone like you alive." "Someone like me," Fiona repeated softly. "And what is someone like me, Dominic?" He sighed, the sound of a man burdened by a slow child. "Someone who doesn't understand the complexities of my world. Someone who enjoys the luxury I provide, but doesn't have to carry the weight of it. Just try not to embarrass me tonight. Bianca is going to be there managing the PR for the event, and I need everything to run smoothly." The name landed like a slap. Bianca, his public relations manager, the woman who lingered a little too long at his side in press photos, the woman who looked at Fiona with a mixture of pity and amusement. "Is she?" Fiona asked, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. "I suppose she'll be wearing something appropriate too?" Dominic's jaw tightened. "Don't start, Fiona. Not tonight. This deal with the Kincaid Group is worth 200 million. If I close it, the Mercer empire goes global. Just get in the car." He turned and walked out, leaving the door open. Fiona watched his retreating back. For 3 years, she had played the role. She had been the quiet orphan girl he had rescued from a failing bookstore job. He loved the narrative, the billionaire prince and his Cinderella. But he never bothered to read the rest of the book. He never asked about the years before the bookstore. He never asked about the notebooks she filled late at night. She looked back at the mirror. The navy dress was demure, boring. It was a costume for a supporting character. Fiona reached into the back of her closet, behind the rows of beige and grey Dominic approved of. Her hand brushed against cool silk, a garment bag hidden away. She hesitated. Tonight was the grand Obsidian Gala. The entire city elite would be there. If she deviated from the script, Dominic would be furious. But then she remembered the tone of his voice. Someone like you. Fiona's eyes hardened. She unzipped the hidden bag. 10 minutes, she whispered to the empty room. He can wait 10 minutes. The limousine ride was a study in icy tension. Dominic spent the entire 40-minute drive to the Ritz-Carlton shouting into his phone, barking orders at his assistants. Fiona sat opposite him, her trench coat buttoned all the way to her chin, concealing what lay beneath. When they arrived, the flashbulbs were blinding. The paparazzi swarmed the entrance like moths to a flame. Dominic! Dominic! Over here! Mr. Mercer, is the rumor about the merger true? Dominic put on his public face instantly, a charming, confident smile that didn't reach his eyes. He stepped out, buttoning his jacket, and waved. Then, almost as an afterthought, he turned back to offer a hand to Fiona. She took it, stepping onto the red carpet. The noise was deafening. "Stay close," Dominic hissed through his teeth while smiling for the cameras. "And keep that coat on until we get to the cloakroom. It's freezing out here." They moved through the gauntlet and into the grand ballroom. It was a sea of diamonds, velvet, and ruthless ambition. Waiters circulated with champagne trays, and the air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Almost immediately, a woman approached them. She was striking, wearing a dress that was little more than shimmering silver straps and daring cutouts. It was Bianca. "Dom!" she exclaimed, ignoring Fiona entirely. She placed a hand on his arm, her nails painted a sharp crimson. "Thank God you're here. Winston is over by the bar, and he looks bored. You need to get in there now." Dominic's attention shifted entirely to her. "Is he drinking scotch or martini?" "Scotch. Aged," Bianca said, finally flickering her eyes toward Fiona. Her smile was tight, condescending. "Oh, hello, Fiona. I see you came along. How nice. You might want to grab a drink and find a seat near the back. The business talk is going to get heavy near the front tables." Fiona looked at Bianca, then at her husband. Dominic was already scanning the room, looking for his target. "Go find a table, Fiona," Dominic said, waving his hand dismissively. "I'll come find you when dinner is served. Bianca needs to brief me on the talking points." "You're leaving me here?" "Alone?" Fiona asked. "You're not a child," Dominic snapped, his patience snapping. "Just sit down and don't talk to anyone important. I have work to do." He turned his back on her. He walked away with Bianca, their heads bent together, laughing at something she whispered. Fiona stood alone in the middle of the foyer. People brushed past her. She heard whispers. "That's Mercer's wife, right?" "The quiet one. Poor thing, she looks like a nanny. Look at him with Bianca. It's hardly a secret anymore, is it?" Shame burned in her cheeks, hot and sharp. But beneath the shame, something else was kindling. It was the same fire that had kept her alive when she lost her parents at 18. It was the fire that drove her to study until her eyes blurred, even when she had no money for tuition. She wasn't a nanny. She wasn't a charity case. She saw the cloakroom attendant, a young man named Leo, whom she recognized from previous events. He looked at her sympathetically. "Mrs. Mercer, can I take your coat?" Fiona looked at Dominic's retreating figure. He was laughing, clinking glasses with a group of investors. He looked powerful. He looked untouchable. She looked at Leo. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her lips. "Yes, Leo," she said. "Take it. Burn it if you want." She undid the buttons of the trench coat. The heavy wool slid off her shoulders and pooled on the floor. The chatter in the immediate vicinity didn't just stop, it evaporated. Underneath the drab coat, Fiona wasn't wearing the navy blue dress. She was wearing a gown of pure, liquid gold. It was strapless, hugging her curves with architectural precision, the fabric shimmering as if it were alive. It was bold. It was regal. and it was a design that no one in this room could buy, because it was a one-of-a-kind creation by Elara, the mysterious, anonymous designer that every celebrity in Hollywood was trying to find. But the dress wasn't the only shock. Around her neck sat a necklace that made the chandeliers look dim. It was a cascade of sapphires and diamonds, a piece so distinct and historical that it belonged in a museum. Fiona lifted her chin. She didn't look like a nervous housewife anymore. She looked like an empress who had just claimed her throne. "Leo," she said, her voice clear and commanding. "Where is the VIP organizer? I believe I have a keynote speech to give." Leo's jaw dropped. You are the keynote speaker." "The program lists the speaker as the architect," Fiona said smoothly. "That would be me." She turned and walked toward the ballroom floor. The sound of her heels on the marble was rhythmic, purposeful. As she entered the main hall, heads turned, not one by one, but in waves. The conversation died down, replaced by a collective gasp. Dominic was standing near the bar, laughing at a joke Winston had made. He saw Winston's eyes widen. He saw Winston's gaze drift over his shoulder. "Good Lord," Winston muttered. "Who is that?" Dominic frowned. He hated when Winston was distracted. "Probably some actress trying to get attention. Ignore her, Winston. About the merger." "No, Dominic," Winston said, putting his glass down. "Look." Dominic turned around, annoyed. His breath hitched in his throat. He blinked, sure that he was hallucinating. Walking through the center of the room, parting the crowd like the Red Sea, was a vision in gold. The woman carried herself with a terrifying grace. She was radiant. She was magnificent. And she was his wife. Dominic Mercer felt a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. Panic. It started in his chest and clawed its way up his throat. He watched the woman in gold move through the crowd, stopping to accept a glass of champagne from a waiter who looked as if he might faint from being in her presence. "Dominic," Bianca hissed, her nails digging into his tuxedo sleeve. "Who is that? Why is she wearing that? You told me she was a mouse." "I don't know," Dominic snapped, pulling his arm away. "Stay here." He marched across the ballroom floor, abandoning his carefully cultivated calm. He intercepted Fiona just as she was about to be approached by the mayor. Dominic grabbed her upper arm, his grip tight, pulling her slightly away from the center of the room into the shadow of a large marble pillar. "What do you think you're doing?" Dominic whispered furiously, his face inches from hers. "Have you lost your mind?" "Take that off." Fiona looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his eyes. Her expression was unreadable, completely devoid of the fear he was used to seeing. "Take it off," she repeated, her voice calm and amused. "We are in the middle of a ballroom, Dominic. That would be rather scandalous, don't you think?" "Don't play games with me," he growled. "Where did you get this dress? Where did you get the money? And that necklace? It looks ridiculous. Everyone knows I didn't buy it for you. You look like you're playing dress-up in costume jewelry. You are humiliating me." Fiona laughed. It was a soft, dark sound that sent a shiver down Dominic's spine. "Humiliating you?" she asked. "Dominic, look around." He hesitated, then glanced over his shoulder. He expected to see people snickering. He expected to see the elite of the city mocking his wife's desperate attempt for attention. Instead, he saw admiration. He saw envy. The mayor was staring. The CEO of the rival banking firm was staring. And most importantly, Winston Kincaid, the man Dominic needed to impress to save his company, was staring with an expression of pure awe. "They aren't laughing, Dominic," Fiona whispered, leaning in close. "They're captivated. You wanted a trophy wife? Well, here she is. Polish me off and show me off. Isn't that the job? You. Dominic started, but he was cut off. Dominic, introduce us. It was Winston Kincaid. The older billionaire approached them, beaming. He ignored Dominic entirely and turned his charm on Fiona. Mrs. Mercer, Winston said, bowing slightly, I must say, I have attended these galas for 40 years. I have never seen an entrance like that. You have breathed life into a very dull evening. Fiona smiled, and it wasn't the shy, nervous smile she used at home. It was dazzling. Mr. Kincaid, I've read your recent interview in Forbes regarding sustainable urban development. Fascinating perspective on the integration of green energy in historical districts. Dominic froze. She read Forbes? Since when did she read anything other than romance novels? Winston's eyebrows shot up. You read that? Most people found it dry. I'm impressed. I didn't know your husband took an interest in my eco-initiatives. Oh, he doesn't, Fiona said smoothly, glancing at Dominic with a look that could cut glass. Dominic prefers the bottom line. I prefer the horizon. Winston roared with laughter, clapping Dominic on the back. She's sharp, Mercer. You've been hiding her away. Why? Afraid she'd outshine you? Dominic forced a stiff smile. Fiona is full of surprises tonight. Bianca appeared at Dominic's elbow, sensing that she was losing her territory. She looked Fiona up and down, her eyes narrowing on the necklace. It is a lovely costume, Fiona, Bianca said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. But aren't you worried that big blue stone is a bit much? It looks a bit heavy. Perhaps you should take it off before you strain your neck. Costume jewelry can be so clunky. The circle of listeners went quiet. It was a direct insult, implying the gems were fake. Fiona turned her gaze to Bianca. She didn't get angry. She didn't flush. She simply reached up and touched the center sapphire. This isn't costume jewelry, Bianca, Fiona said quietly, but her voice carried. This is the heart of the ocean's sister. It was commissioned in 1912. It has been in a private vault in Geneva for 50 years. It was released only yesterday. Bianca scoffed. And we're supposed to believe Dominic bought you a historic artifact? Please. Dominic didn't buy it, Fiona said. Then who did? Dominic demanded, his jealousy flaring. Who bought you that necklace, Fiona? Fiona looked him dead in the eye. I did. Silence descended on the group. Dominic stared at her. You? With what money? The allowance I give you for groceries? No, Fiona said, her voice hardening. With the money I earned. You see, Dominic, while you were busy working late with Bianca, I was working too. But we can discuss my resume later. Right now, the Master of Ceremonies is calling for everyone to take their seats. I believe the keynote speaker is about to begin. She turned and walked away, leaving Dominic, Bianca, and Winston standing in her wake. Curious, Winston mused, watching her go. Very curious. Mercer, if you don't treat that woman right, someone else will. Dominic grit his teeth. He felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. He had to regain control. He grabbed Bianca's hand. Come on, let's sit. I'm going to get to the bottom of this farce as soon as we get home. The grand ballroom was dimly lit, the spotlights focused on the center stage. Hundreds of guests sat at round tables draped in white linen. Dominic sat at the front table, reserved for platinum donors, with Bianca on his left and an empty chair on his right, where Fiona should have been. Where did she go? Dominic muttered, checking his watch. She's making a scene by not being at the table. Maybe she went to the bathroom to cry, Bianca whispered, sipping her wine. You were pretty harsh with her. She probably realized she's out of her depth. On stage, the host tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, the voice boomed. "Tonight is a night of revelation. For the past 3 years, the city's skyline has been transforming. The new Opera House, the Solaris Tower, the renovation of the West District. All of these masterpieces were designed by a single firm. A firm known only as Vertex Designs, led by an anonymous genius known to the industry only as the Architect." A murmur of excitement went through the crowd. Everyone knew Vertex Designs. They were the hottest architecture firm in the country. Their contracts were worth billions, but no one knew who ran it. "Tonight," the host continued, "to celebrate the launch of the Obsidian Charity Fund, the Architect has agreed to reveal their identity and auction off the blueprints for the upcoming Sky Bridge project." Dominic leaned forward. "This is it," he whispered to Bianca. "If I can buy those blueprints, the Kincaid deal is sealed. I need to know who this architect is, so I can make them an offer before the bidding starts." "Please welcome," the host shouted, gesturing to the curtains, "the CEO and lead designer of Vertex Designs." The heavy velvet curtains parted. Dominic raised his glass, ready to toast the old man or eccentric artist he expected to walk out. A figure stepped into the spotlight. The gold dress shimmered like liquid fire. The sapphires at her throat caught the light, sending blue fractals dancing across the room. It was Fiona. Dominic's glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the table, shattering, red wine soaking into the white tablecloth. He didn't even notice. "No," he whispered. "That's impossible." Fiona walked to the podium. She adjusted the microphone, her poise absolute. She looked out over the crowd, her eyes scanning the darkness until they landed on the front table. On Dominic. "Good evening," she said. Her voice was amplified, rich and confident. The voice of a woman who commanded boardrooms, not a woman who asked for permission to buy new curtains. "I am Fiona Mercer, but in the world of design, you know me as the Architect." The room erupted. Gasps, applause, and shocked whispers filled the air. "She's the Architect? Mercer's wife? The quiet one? My God, she designed the Solaris Tower." Dominic felt like he couldn't breathe. The Solaris Tower. He had praised that building for months. He had told Fiona over dinner, while ignoring her, that the man who designed it was a visionary. He had been calling his own wife a visionary without ever looking at her. On stage, Fiona continued. "For years I have worked from the shadows. I allowed my work to speak for itself. But recently I realized that silence is not always a virtue. Sometimes silence is just submission, and I am done submitting." She clicked a remote in her hand. A massive screen behind her lit up, displaying a complex, beautiful 3D rendering of a futuristic bridge connecting the city's financial district to the harbor. "This is the Sky Bridge," Fiona said. "It is my masterpiece. It utilizes solar skin technology and wind harvesting support beams. It is the future of this city." She paused, letting the image sink in. "Usually, I would auction this to the highest bidder," she said. "However, tonight is different. Tonight, I am looking for a partner who understands value, not just price." She looked directly at Dominic again. The camera crews zoomed in on her face, projecting her intense gaze onto the side screens. "My husband," she said, the word hanging in the air. "Dominic Mercer has been trying to close a deal with the Kincaid Group to develop the harbor. He believes that money is the only language that matters." Dominic went pale. She was airing their business in front of everyone. "But Mr. Kincaid," Fiona said, turning her head to where Winston sat in the front row, "I know that you value integrity. You value vision. And you value respect." Winston stood up slowly, his eyes locked on Fiona. "I do," Winston called out, his voice booming without a microphone. "Then I have a proposal," Fiona said. "I am the owner of the land the Sky Bridge sits on. I bought it 3 years ago under the name Vertex Designs. Dominic, you have been trying to buy that land for 6 months, haven't you? You've been screaming at your assistants because the anonymous owner wouldn't sell." Dominic slumped in his chair. He had cursed the owner of that land every day. It was her the whole time. "I am willing to sign the land and the design over to the Kincaid Group," Fiona announced, "for free." The crowd gasped. "Free?" someone shouted. "On one condition," Fiona said, her voice turning into steel. "The contract will stipulate that the Mercer Corporation, and specifically Dominic Mercer, is barred from any involvement in the project. He is blacklisted from the development." The shockwave hit Dominic like a physical blow. She wasn't just embarrassing him. She was destroying his career. This deal was supposed to save his company from bankruptcy. Without it, he was finished. "You can't do this!" Dominic screamed, jumping up from his chair. He ignored the wine dripping from his lap. "Fiona, stop this madness!" "Security," Fiona said calmly into the microphone. "Please ask the heckler to sit down. He's interrupting the presentation." 2 large security guards stepped toward Dominic. He looked around wildly. Bianca had already scooted her chair away from him, looking at him like he was a contagion. Winston Kincaid walked up to the edge of the stage. He looked at Dominic, then up at Fiona. "Mrs. Mercer," Winston said, "or should I say, Ms. Architect, you have a deal." Fiona smiled. "Thank you, Winston. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a party to enjoy, and I believe my husband has some bankruptcy papers to file." She stepped back from the podium as the room erupted into thunderous applause. Not for Dominic, but for the woman who had just crushed him. Dominic stood there, the applause ringing in his ears like a death knell. He looked at Fiona, really looked at her, for the first time in years, and he realized with a sickening jolt that the woman he had ignored was the most powerful person in the room. And he had just lost her. But the night wasn't over. Fiona had one more secret to reveal. The applause eventually died down, replaced by a buzzing energy that filled the room. The atmosphere had shifted entirely. Dominic Mercer was no longer the king of the jungle. He was the wounded gazelle, and the predators were circling. Dominic stood frozen near the stage, his face flushed with a mixture of rage and humiliation. He watched Fiona descend the stairs, surrounded immediately by admirers. Winston Kincaid was shaking her hand vigorously. The mayor was waiting his turn. Photographers were fighting for angles. Dominic felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned, expecting comfort from Bianca. "Well," Bianca said, her voice icy. She was clutching her clutch bag, looking at him with undisguised disdain. "That was educational." "Bianca," Dominic stammered, grabbing her arm. "You have to help me fix this. Go talk to the press. Spin this. Say she's mentally unstable. Say she stole the designs from me." Bianca laughed, a harsh, dry sound. She pulled her arm away, smoothing the silk of her dress where he had touched it. "Spin it?" Bianca asked incredulously. "Dominic, she just proved she owns the land you need to survive. She proved she designed the buildings you took credit for. There is no spin. You're finished." "I'm still Dominic Mercer," he shouted, drawing a few stairs. "I have assets. I have." "You have debt," Bianca cut in. "Everyone knows the company is leveraged to the hilt waiting for this Kincaid deal. Without it, the banks will call in your loans by Monday morning. I'm a PR manager, Dominic. My job is to manage reputations, not resurrect corpses. I don't date bankrupt men." She didn't even say goodbye. She turned on her heel and walked straight toward a group of hedge fund managers, her smile already back in place, hunting for a new target. Dominic was alone. The woman he had ignored his wife for had abandoned him in seconds. Fury, hot and blinding, took over. He pushed through the crowd, shoving a waiter aside. He needed to get to Fiona. He needed to make her stop this. She was his wife. She belonged to him. She couldn't just destroy him. Fiona was laughing at something Winston said when she saw Dominic storming toward her. She didn't flinch. She simply stopped laughing and watched him come, her expression bored. "Fiona!" Dominic barked, breaking into the circle of elites surrounding her. "We are leaving. Now." Winston Kincaid frowned, stepping slightly in front of Fiona. "Mr. Mercer, I think your wife is having a pleasant evening. Perhaps you should go cool off." "She is my wife," Dominic yelled, losing all composure. He reached out to grab Fiona's wrist. "You don't get to embarrass me like this, Fiona. You think you're smart? You think this is a game? I made you. I took you out of the gutter." Just as his fingers were about to close around her wrist, a hand shot out from the crowd. It was a large, powerful hand. It clamped onto Dominic's wrist like a steel vice, stopping him mid-air. Dominic looked up, wincing at the pressure. Standing there was a man Dominic recognized, but had never met. Sebastian Hale. He was a tech mogul, a man who had made his billions in aerospace and software. He was taller than Dominic, broader, and possessed a kind of dangerous stillness that Dominic lacked. Sebastian was known for being ruthless in business and fiercely private. "I believe," Sebastian said, his voice low and dangerous. "The lady is not interested in leaving." Dominic tried to yank his hand back, but Sebastian's grip didn't waver. "Let go of me," Dominic spat. "This is a domestic matter. It's none of your business, Hale." "Actually," Sebastian said, his eyes cold, "it is my business, since Vertex Designs is a subsidiary of Hale Industries." Dominic stopped breathing. The room went silent again. "What?" Dominic whispered. Sebastian released Dominic's hand with a shove that sent him stumbling back. He moved to stand next to Fiona, not in front of her like a protector, but beside her, like an equal. He placed a hand gently on the small of her back, a gesture of intimacy that made Dominic's stomach churn. "Fiona didn't just build Vertex alone," Sebastian explained to the stunned audience. "She needed a silent partner to handle the legal protections so her husband wouldn't steal her work. I was honored to be that partner." Sebastian looked down at Fiona, and for the first time that night, his stoic face softened into a genuine, warm smile. "You were brilliant tonight, Elle. The projection mapping was a nice touch." "Thank you, Seb," Fiona said, smiling back at him with a familiarity that shattered Dominic's heart. "I thought the bridge looked good in blue." "Seb?" Dominic choked out. You know him." Fiona looked back at Dominic, her eyes hard again. "Sebastian and I went to university together, Dominic, on full scholarships. While you were partying on your father's money, we were studying in the library until 3 a.m. He's been my best friend for 10 years. "Best friend?" Dominic accused, pointing a shaking finger. "You've been cheating on me, you hypocrite." Sebastian stepped forward, his fists clenching, but Fiona put a hand on his chest to stop him. "Cheating?" Fiona laughed. "Dominic, Sebastian has never touched me inappropriately. Unlike you and Bianca. Unlike you and your secretary last year. Unlike you and the endless list of women I've known about since our honeymoon." You knew?" Dominic faltered. "I know everything, Dominic," Fiona said softly. "I know about the offshore accounts you tried to hide. I know about the loans you took out in my name, which, by the way, was fraud. And I know you planned to serve me divorce papers next week after the Kincaid deal closed, so you wouldn't have to share the profits." She reached into her golden clutch and pulled out a folded document. You wanted a divorce? She asked, tossing the papers at his feet. Happy anniversary, darling. I signed them this morning. The papers landed on the polished marble floor with a soft slap. Dominic stared at them. They were real. The crowd was whispering feverishly now. This was better than any movie. This was the destruction of a titan, live and in high definition. I can fix this, Dominic mumbled, the reality of his situation crashing down on him. He looked at Winston. Winston, please. We can still do business. I can offer you better terms on the older properties. Winston shook his head sadly. Dominic, you don't have any properties. What? Dominic blinked. The bank called while you were shouting, Winston said, holding up his phone. News travels fast. The banks have frozen your assets pending an investigation into the fraud Fiona just mentioned. You don't own anything right now. Dominic felt his knees give way. He stumbled, catching himself on the edge of a table. Fiona, he pleaded, his voice cracking. He looked up at her, trying to summon the charm that had worked on her 3 years ago. Fiona, baby. Look, we can talk about this. I've been stressed. The business, it gets to me. But I love you. You know I love you. We can start over. With your talent and my connections, we could be unstoppable. Don't throw away our marriage for a moment of anger. Fiona looked down at him. There was no pity in her eyes, only fatigue. I loved you, Dominic, she said. I really did. When you found me in that bookstore, I thought you were my Prince Charming. I ignored the red flags. I ignored the way you talked down to waiters. I ignored the way you silenced me. She took a step closer. But love isn't enough when there is no respect, she continued. And you didn't just disrespect me. You erased me. You wanted a statue, Dominic. Well, statues don't forgive. She turned to Sebastian. I'm tired. Can we go? Of course, Sebastian said. He glared at Dominic one last time. Don't follow us. Wait, Dominic scrambled up. Where am I supposed to go? If the banks freeze my accounts? The penthouse? I can go to the penthouse, right? Fiona stopped. She didn't turn around. The penthouse? She asked over her shoulder. Oh, I forgot to mention. The building management company. I bought that last month, too. You're evicted, Dominic. Your keycard was deactivated an hour ago. You can't do that, Dominic screamed. That's my home. My clothes are there. My watch collection. Your things have been packed, Fiona said calmly. They are in a box with the doorman. Well, most of them. I donated your suits to a charity for job-seeking men. I figured you wouldn't need tuxedos where you're going. Where am I going? Dominic yelled, tears streaming down his face now. Fiona turned back one last time. She smiled, but it was a sad smile. I don't know, Dominic. You're a smart man. Figure it out. Or maybe ask Bianca if you can crash on her couch. Oh, wait. She left. She took Sebastian's arm. Let's go get a burger, Seb. I'm starving. This dress is too tight for fine dining. Sebastian chuckled, the sound rich and warm. Whatever you want, Elle. Burgers it is. They walked out of the ballroom together, leaving the chaos behind. The cameras flashed, capturing the image of the golden architect and the tech mogul, leaving the broken billionaire in the dust. Dominic stood alone in the center of the room. The guests were starting to drift away, uncomfortable with the raw display of emotion. The waiters began clearing the broken glass from his dropped wine. One waiter, a young man, swept the shards near Dominic's expensive Italian shoes. Excuse me, sir, the waiter said politely. You're standing in the mess. Dominic looked down. He looked at the divorce papers on the floor. He looked at the empty door where his wife had exited. He wasn't standing in the mess. He was the mess. He fell to his knees, burying his face in his hands, and for the first time in his life, Dominic Mercer cried, not for a lost deal, but for the realization that he had held a diamond in his hand and treated it like a rock until he threw it away. 1 year later, the city of Viridia had transformed. What was once a skyline dominated by rigid, grey concrete and the smog of industry had been pierced by a miracle of modern engineering. A silver ribbon of steel and glass sliced through the air, connecting the bustling financial district to the historic harbour with a grace that defied gravity. The Sky Bridge. It wasn't just a structure, it was a statement. It was a testament to vision, resilience, and the power of stepping out of the shadows. It was the day of the grand opening, and the energy in the air was electric. The press was there in full force, a swarm of reporters and cameramen jostling for position. Drones buzzed overhead like mechanical hummingbirds, capturing sweeping aerial shots of the gleaming architecture. But this time, the lenses weren't hunting for Dominic Mercer. They weren't looking for the man who had once claimed this city as his personal playground. They were looking for Fiona. Fiona stood at the center of the bridge, the high-altitude wind whipping her hair back, carrying the scent of salt water and ozone. She wore a white power suit, crisp, tailored, and modern, a stark contrast to the golden gown of her debut a year ago, but just as commanding. The gold had been a costume of rebellion. The white was the uniform of a leader. She stood tall, her hands resting on the railing, feeling the subtle, rhythmic hum of the bridge beneath her feet. It was alive, breathing with the city. Beside her stood Sebastian. He looked dashing in a charcoal suit that fit his broad frame perfectly, but his attention wasn't on the marvel of engineering before them. His eyes never left her face. He watched her with a mixture of pride and something deeper, something that had simmered quietly for a decade. "Nervous?" Sebastian murmured, leaning in close so only she could hear over the roar of the wind and the distant chatter of the crowd. Fiona turned to him, her smile slow and genuine. She looked out at the water, where the sunlight danced on the waves like shattered diamonds. "No," she said softly. "I built this, Seb. I calculated every stress point, every load-bearing vector. I know it will hold." Sebastian grinned, the corner of his eye crinkling. "I wasn't talking about the bridge." Fiona laughed, a free, unburdened sound that seemed to float up into the clouds. Life had been a whirlwind since that fateful night at the Obsidian Gala. Vertex Designs had exploded, becoming the most sought-after architecture firm in the country. She was no longer just a rumor or a ghostwriter for her husband's ego. She wasn't just the architect anymore. She was Fiona Mercer, though soon to change that name, a celebrity in her own right, a symbol of female empowerment, and a philanthropist who actually cared about the causes she funded. But amidst the triumph, there was always the shadow of the past. Fiona scanned the crowd gathered far below on the harbour promenade. Thousands of people had come to watch the ribbon cutting. From this height, they were a mosaic of colours and movement. Tourists pointing cameras, locals pushing strollers, construction workers in high-vis vests, beaming with pride at what they had built. Her gaze drifted, almost instinctively, to the fringes of the crowd. In the back, near a steaming hot dog vendor, a man stood alone. He wore a faded grey windbreaker that had seen better days, the zipper stuck halfway up. He looked older than his 35 years, his posture slumped, as if the weight of the sky was pressing down on him. His hair, once styled with expensive product, was thinning and unkempt, blown messily by the harbour breeze. He hadn't shaved in days, the stubble greying and patchy. He held a tablet in his hands, but it wasn't the sleek, ultra-thin, top-of-the-line model he used to brandish like a weapon in boardrooms. It was an old, cracked model, likely bought second-hand or salvaged from a pawn shop. It was Dominic. He wasn't there to cause a scene. He didn't have the energy, the money, or the arrogance for that anymore. After the gala, the fall had been swift, brutal, and absolute. The fraud investigation Fiona had triggered had stripped him of everything. The penthouse with the view he never appreciated, the fleet of luxury cars he rarely drove, the stock portfolio he obsessively checked, all seized to pay back the creditors he had defrauded. He had avoided jail time only by the skin of his teeth, pleading guilty and liquidating every single asset he had hidden in offshore accounts. Now Dominic Mercer, the former Prince of Viridia, worked as a mid-level shift manager at a logistics warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was a 9-to-5 grind of clipboards, angry truck drivers, and fluorescent lights. He clocked in, he clocked out. He lived in a small, drafty studio apartment in the East End, the very district he used to mock for its grime and lack of potential. He stood there now, watching the giant LED screens set up on the promenade, broadcasting the ceremony live. He saw the high-definition close-up of Fiona's face. He saw the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke about connecting communities. He saw her laugh at something Sebastian whispered, and he saw the way she looked at Sebastian. It was a look of total trust, of safety, of adoration. It was a look Dominic had never earned and certainly never received. "She looks happy," a voice said beside him. Dominic jumped, nearly dropping his cracked tablet. He turned to see an older man standing next to him, wearing a nondescript baseball cap and sunglasses to blend in with the tourists. But the voice was unmistakable. "Mr. Kincaid," Dominic stammered, instinctively straightening his spine, a reflex from a life he no longer lived. I didn't know you'd be down here with the regular people." Winston Kincaid adjusted his sunglasses, looking up at the silver arc of the bridge cutting through the blue sky. "The view is better from here," Winston said, his tone contemplative. "From down here, you can see the foundation. You can see the pillars. You can see what actually holds it up." He glanced sideways at Dominic, his expression unreadable. "Something you never bothered to look at, Dominic. You were always too busy looking down from the penthouse." Dominic flinched. The truth stung more than the wind. He looked down at his scuffed shoes, cheap leather that pinched his toes. "I know," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You don't have to rub it in, Winston." "I'm not," Winston said softly, turning to face him fully. "I'm just glad to see you're still standing. Some men wouldn't have survived the fall you took. It takes a certain kind of strength to start over from zero." "I almost didn't," Dominic admitted, the confession tumbling out before he could stop it. "There were nights. Well, it doesn't matter now." He looked back at the giant screen. Fiona was holding a large pair of ceremonial scissors. Sebastian's hand was placed gently over hers, guiding her, supporting her. The image was a portrait of partnership, something Dominic had never understood. "She really was the genius behind it all, wasn't she?" Dominic murmured, half to himself. "All those years, I thought she was just scribbling in notebooks. I thought she was wasting time on little hobbies. I told her that, you know. I told her she was wasting paper." "You saw what you wanted to see," Winston replied, his voice lacking judgment but heavy with truth. "We all do, sometimes. We see the world through the lens of our own ego. But now, the lens is broken. Now, you see the truth." On the screen, Fiona smiled, a radiant, conquering smile, and cut the ribbon. The crowd around them roared. Confetti cannons fired from the bridge's suspension cables, filling the sky with a blizzard of gold and silver paper that drifted down like snow. Children squealed, chasing the shiny scraps. Dominic felt a hard, painful lump form in his throat. He remembered the last thing he had said to her in that ballroom, desperate and cruel, that she was nothing without him, that he had made her. He realized now, with a clarity that broke his heart, that he had been the anchor dragging her down. He was the dead weight. Without him, she hadn't just floated. She had soared into the stratosphere. "I should go," Dominic said abruptly, turning up the collar of his windbreaker. The celebration felt too bright, too loud for a ghost like him. "My shift starts in an hour. If I'm late, they dock my pay." "Good luck, Dominic," Winston said, offering a small, sad nod. Dominic turned and walked away. He forced himself not to look back at the bridge. He didn't look back at the flashing cameras or the woman in white. He just walked toward the subway station, head down, merging into the stream of commuters. He was just another anonymous face in the crowd, another cog in the machine, learning the hard way that the greatest luxury in life isn't money or power or a view from the top. It's having someone who sees you, truly sees you, for who you are. And he had been blind until it was too late. Up on the bridge, the ceremony was winding down. The VIPs were moving toward the reception tent, where champagne and canapés awaited. The wind had picked up, but it felt invigorating, not cold. Sebastian stopped Fiona as she turned to follow the mayor. He pulled her gently toward the railing, away from the microphones. "Wait," he said, his voice dropping to a serious register. "There's one more thing, before the madness of the party starts." "We're on a tight schedule, Seb," Fiona teased, checking her watch, though her heart picked up a beat at the intensity in his eyes. "The governor is waiting." Sebastian ignored the schedule. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. He didn't pull out a velvet ring box. That was too cliché, too performative for them. Instead, he pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. It was yellowed with age, the edges worn soft and fuzzy. Fiona took it, her brows knitting in confusion. Her hands shook slightly as she unfolded the fragile paper. It was a napkin. A cheap brown paper napkin from the university cafeteria, dated 10 years ago. On it, drawn in fading blue ballpoint ink, was a rough, almost childish sketch of two stick figures standing on top of a suspension bridge. Underneath the drawing, in Sebastian's messy, familiar handwriting, it read, "One day you'll build it, and I'll be there to see it." The breath left Fiona's lungs in a rush. The memory hit her like a physical wave. Late nights in the library, cheap coffee, Sebastian listening to her wild dreams when no one else would. He had believed in her before she had a portfolio. He had believed in her before she believed in herself. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and sudden. "You kept this?" she whispered, staring at the napkin. "For 10 years? Through everything?" "I kept it," Sebastian said, his voice thick with emotion, stepping closer to shield her from the wind. "Because I always knew who you were, Fiona, even when you forgot, even when he tried to make you forget. I knew the architect was in there, waiting to build something beautiful." He reached out and took her hand, interlacing their fingers. His grip was warm, solid, permanent. "You've built your bridge, Fiona," Sebastian whispered, looking deep into her eyes. "You've proven everything you needed to prove. Now I want to build something else. I want to build a life with you. No hiding, no shadows, no silent partners. Just us." Fiona looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the years of friendship, the silent support during her darkest marriage days, the patient love that had waited for her to be free, to be whole. She realized that while she had built the bridge, he had been the ground that allowed her to stand. She dropped the napkin, letting the wind take it, letting the past fly away, and threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in the crook of his shoulder. "Yes," she whispered into his coat, the word carried away by the breeze, but caught by the only person who mattered. Just us. Finally. High above the city, amidst the cheers of the city she had changed and the wind that sang through the cables, the architect finally found her home. It wasn't in a penthouse, or a boardroom, or a monument of steel. It was in the arms of the man who had loved her when she was invisible. And as the sun began to set over the Viridia harbour, painting the sky in breathless shades of gold and violet, Fiona Mercer, soon to be Fiona Hale, smiled. She had shocked the world, she had humbled a billionaire, but most importantly, she had found herself. The statue had crumbled to dust. The woman had risen. What an incredible journey. From being treated like a piece of furniture to revealing herself as the brilliant mind behind the city's greatest architecture. Fiona's story is the ultimate proof that you should never underestimate the quiet ones. Dominic learned the hard way that when you treat a diamond like glass, you're bound to get cut when it shatters. So, what do you think? Did Dominic deserve a second chance, or was his punishment fitting? And would you have chosen the loyal best friend Sebastian over the wealthy husband? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, success and true love, please smash that like button, share this video with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next drama.